So I will speak about T and B cell activation. T and B cell activation. So T cell activation, then B cell activation and class switching. B cell activation and class switching. So first we will see the direction. So we will go in this direction, then we will go in this direction. So this is called what? Antigen presenting cells. Antigen presenting cells. And this is called what? This is the activation of T cells. This is a T cell. T cell. Then this T cell will go here, and then it will activate the B cell. Activation of B cells. It will activate the B cell. So at first there is activation of T cell, then the T cell will go here, then it will activate the B cell. So at first T and B cell activation, we have ABC, antigen presenting cells, like what? B cell, dendritic cells, Langerhans cells, macrophage. So we have B cell, dendritic cells, Langerhans cells, and macrophage. These are called antigen presenting cells. So there is two signals required for T cell activation and B cell activation plus class switching. So there is two signals required for T cell activation and B cell activation plus class switching. So at first T cell activation. So here we have antigen presenting cells. So what are these two signals? This is the first signal, the second signal. Then here this is the first signal, then this is the second signal. So first the antigen presenting cells for activation of T cells. Antigen presenting cells will take antigen and present it on MHC2 or 1 plus there is what? CD80 86 which is called B7 plus naive T cells has T cell receptor plus CD4 or CD8 plus CD28. So here antigen presented cells will take antigen and present it on MHC1 or 2. 1 in case of what? CD8. 2 in case of what? CD4. So 1 in case of what? In cases of exogenous or endogenous. So 1 endogenous, MHC1 exogenous, MHC2. So 1 in case of endogenous will activate what? Will bind to CD8. 1 in case of endogenous, CD8 on T cell plus T cell receptor. But if it's exogenous pathogen, exogenous antigen, so it's what? It's presented on MHC2, so it will bind to CD4 on naive T cells. So again, antigen presented cells will present antigen on MHC1 or 2, depending on exogenous or endogenous. If it's endogenous, so it's what? It's 1. So it will bind to CD8 on naive T cells. If it's exogenous, so it will be presented on MHC2, and it will bind to CD4 on naive T cells. Plus antigen presented cells has another one which is called CD86, which is B7 will bind to CD28. This pathway leading to activation of T cells. So we spoke about the difference between CD4 T cells and CD8 T cells. CD8, it's called cytotoxic. CD4 it's called helper. CD4 T helper. So of course this type of activated T cells is called what? CD4. Why? Because it will help the B cell activation. So CD8 cytotoxic will go and kill the cell infected by the virus or the tumor. But here it's a CD4. Why? Because it's a CD4 T helper. So it will help B cell for activation. It will help B cell activation. So here we have two signals. So we have again here naive T cells contains what? Has T cell receptor plus CD4 or CD8. In this case it will be CD4 plus there is another signal here called CD40L, CD40 ligand, CD40L. So activated CD4 T helper, so it will help B cell activation. So contains T cell receptor plus CD4 in this case, so it will bind to MHC1 or 2. So here the B cell will take antigen by endocytosis, and it will present it on MHC2 because of CD4 on activated T cells, which is CD4 T helper, plus there is binding of CD40 B cell with CD40 ligand of activated CD4 T helper cell, leading to what? Releasing of cytokines from activated T cell plus activation of B cell. So there is activity of B cells. So where is the class switching? By releasing of these cytokines from CD4 T helper cells, leading to class switching of immunoglobulin released from this activated B cells. So again, in this pathway there is activation of B cell now by binding of CD4 T helper with B cell, plus there is class switching by releasing of cytokines from activated CD4 T helper cell, which will lead to class switching of immunoglobulins that are released from the B cell, So first we will speak about the first one, T cell activation. So ABC, which is antigen presenting cells. This is antigen presenting cells process antigen. This is the antigen, then migrates to the lymph node. In lymph node there is what? There is T cell activation. How? There is exogenous and there is endogenous. So exogenous in case of what? Exogenous antigen presented on what? MHC2. So 2 in this case because it's exogenous, so it will bind to what? To which one? 2 will bind to CD4. So here it will bind to CD4 plus T cell receptor. So CD4 plus T cell receptor. But in case of endogenous, it will be presented on what? Cross-presented antigen is presented on what? MHC1, and it will bind to what? CD8 plus T cell receptor. CD8 plus there is another signal which is responsible for proliferation and survival. So there is co-stimulatory signal via interaction of B7, which is CD86, which is B7, CD86 on dendritic cells, and CD28 on naive T cells, leading to activation of T cells. Activated T helper cell produce what? Cytokines. T cell able to recognize and kill virus infected cells. Plus here there is B cell activation and class switching. Here there is what? The previous activated T cell T helper cell activation. T helper, why? CD4 T helper. It will help B cell activation and the release of immunoglobulins, then class switching. Then there is what? B cell receptor mediated endocytosis. Here B cell, there is what? B cell receptor will mediate antigen process, antigen endocytosis. So there is what? In this case it's exogenous. Why? CD4 T helper. So CD4 will bind to MHC2. So it must be exogenous because MHC1 responsible for endogenous, MHC2 responsible for exogenous. So exogenous antigen presented on MHC2 for B cells and recognized by what? T cell receptor on T helper CD4 T helper cell. Then there is another one, CD40 receptor. CD40 will bind to CD40 ligand, CD40 ligand on T helper cell. Then T helper cell secrete what? Cytokines to determine the class switching of B cells. So at first, B cells are once activated, there is production of which type of immunoglobulins? Immunoglobulin M. So there is activated B cell and there is production of immunoglobulin M. Then this immunoglobulin M undergo class switching and affinity maturation. So there is class switching. So this class switching is mediated by what? By cytokine release from the activated T helper cells. So there is activation of B cells plus release of cytokines from activated CD4 T helper cells to help in class switching